First of all, welcome everyone to the Reparation Information Thought Series, a periodic strategic webinar featuring reparations experts, racial justice, thought leaders, and you engaged in critical discussion, reflection, and analysis on issues pertinent to the movement for reparatory justice in the United States and abroad. It is co-hosted by the Reparation Education Project and the National Black Cultural Information Trust. Reparation Education Project is directed by myself, Nikichi Taifa. The National Black Cultural Information Trust is directed by Jessica Ann Mitchell. Say it.
I woo your.
She got on me last time because I wasn't pronouncing it correct. We're very, very honored that the thought series that we have today, we're going to have a fireside chat. We're going to get, informal. We're going to get personal. We're going to get loosey-goosey because we have a favorite person that we are featuring in this fireside chat. She's none other than Robin Rue Simmons, and we just came off of a phenomenal convening that we'll be talking about after we share her bio. But I just want to say that it's just a pleasure to be sharing this webinar space with what I call history in the making. So Jam, Jessica Ann Mitchell is who we also call Jam. If you can introduce our esteemed guest for this fireside chat.
Yes, definitely. Robin Rue Simmons is the founder and executive director of First Repair, a not-for-profit organization that informs local reparations nationally. She serves as a chairperson of the City of Evanston's Reparations Committee. Rue Simmons is the former 5th Ward Alderman of the City of Evanston, Illinois, where she led, in collaboration with others, the passage of the nation's first municipally funded reparations legislation for Black residents, which began disbursements in January 2022. Rue Simmons was born and raised in the largely segregated 5th Ward of Evanston, a city of 75,000 on the shores of Lake Michigan on the northern border of Chicago. She laid the foundation for her life's work in 1998 when she became a residential real estate broker. Troubled by the wealth disparities and concentrated poverty she witnessed locally and saw in other urban communities, she wanted to help young adults begin to build wealth through home ownership. As an entrepreneur, she launched and operated multiple businesses, including a bookstore in the 5th Ward that also offered free after-school programming, and a construction company in Evanston that employed Black tradespeople, developing dozens of affordable houses funded by the Illinois Neighborhood Stabilization Program. She continues to manage a handful of residential and commercial properties in Evanston. So welcome, Robin Rue Simmons.
Thank you for the warm welcome. I am as excited as you are, Sister Nikichi and Jam, for to be here with you today, coming off of this convening. I can't wait to get into it. I love that it's informal and fun, loosey-goosey, as you said. I'm looking forward to seeing what that's about.
Now, I want to start off with this, if I can.
Okay.
We titled this fireside chat, Robin Rue Simmons, the Rosa Parks of the Reparations Movement. And early on, it might have been at the first convening in Evanston that I heard that term. And I understand that it came from an ancestor who is now an ancestor who was a staunch reparationist, none other than our dear brother from Chicago, Brother Conrad Worrell. And I began to think, I said, he's right. I mean, Rosa Parks sat down on that bus. Actually, it was this week in 1955. It was December 1st, 1955. And it's really interesting because you always have your convenings around this same time period. This ancestral vibration from Rosa Parks is really searing up, within you. But she started a movement. Now, I will say, some folk came to me and said, Nikichi, Robin just came on the scene. How can you call her Rosa Parks? Well, you know what? There were a lot of people before Rosa Parks. There were. But it was Rosa Parks and everything about her that touched the imagination and spirit of the masses of the people that led to the civil rights movement. And essentially, Robin, that's what you've done in Evanston. So what do you think about that? Talk to us a little bit about this. I mean, you always were a famous person, but you are, I said at that first Evanston committee, you were going down in history.
You said that. You said that at that first convening, and you're right. It did come from our great ancestor, Dr. Conrad Royal. I had the privilege of meeting him at a symposium that he had along with the Chicago NCOBRA chapter. And I'm so grateful for him and so many others that have invested in me and shared all of the knowledge that I've been able to apply in my leadership. And I thought it was a lot when I heard it. Cam Howard brought that message to the Evanston Town Hall, which was incredible. It was, several hundred people and national leaders. And Cam delivered that message from Dr. Royal. And in that moment, I didn't fully understand it. But the more the local movement expands and grows, and in Evanston, in 2019, there was Evanston. And now we'll talk about later, there are over 200 initiatives, 70, almost 80 of them were present in Evanston over the last week. I get it. I also am fully aware that it is not me alone, that I'm not innovative, didn't have a novel idea. And I'm also fully aware that I am only possible to lead in this way because of the work of so many others, including Dr. Conrad and Sister Rosa Parks and so many others. And so I am reminded all the time by my mentor, Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, that our work is part of a continuum. It is cumulative. He reminds us all the time that we are building on the work and leadership of those before us. And so I'm privileged. I consider it an honor and privilege to be awakened in this moment, to call the question of reparations in my city, and to be received by so many other leaders and communities to continue leading locally while we make our national demand.
So before I turn it over to Jam for a question, I just want to say one more thing about the Rosa Parks lineage, shall I say. Most folk don't know she was a reparationist. Mm-hmm. Most folk don't know that she worked in the office of Congressman John Conyers, the John Conyers who spearheaded the first federal reparations bill in Congress in 1989. Most folk don't know that it was because of Rosa Parks that Amari Obadeli, who was in prison in Jackson, Mississippi, the reason why he was not murdered while in prison, most folk don't even know what I'm talking about. But what I'm saying this to say, he was the one who gave the spark for the founding of NCOBRA, National Coalition of Blacks for Reparations in America, which spearheaded the modern era of the reparations movement. But it was Rosa Parks who made sure that he lived, okay? Because the call went out to John Conyers' office that there was these people from Detroit who were in Mississippi in prison, part of the Republic of New Africa. And that call went to Rosa Parks because she was working in his office, and she made the phone call to the Hinds County Jail that basically saved their lives. So it's just interesting, these dots that connect all the way through. So I love the lineage, we're going to call it. Right. Folks like to use that term.
That's right.
And you're just carrying it on.
I want to add something about the dates and how significant they are and the ancestors. And I remember Jamoke last week doing his libation and saying that the ancestors were whispering in our ears. And I want to say that everything we do must be intentional. It must be strategic, thoughtful, considering the ancestors. And even my commitment to getting substantial completion of our reparations in Evanston in 2019 was that 400th year of Black resilience here in America. It was very important to me that I, along with the community, accomplish that in honor of our ancestors. The same thing, Chicago, the first week of December, not the best place to come in the United States based on the weather, right? I'm sure everyone wish it was in LA or Miami, but the ancestors really, I think, are fueling us and keeping us strong and thoughtful. So I encourage everyone to be really thoughtful in every move that you make within the movement.
All right.
Thank you so much for that. The thing that I'm always interested in is, when something big happens, people always see the aftermath and flock to the aftermath. But I'm really interested in the mechanics of how you get things to work. And what was one of the hardest things in the background to get you to the point of getting this accomplished? What are some of the things people don't think about that you had to go through, you and your team and the council? What are some of the hoops y'all had to go through to get this accomplished?
Well, going back to 2019, I would say just capacity. As municipal leaders, most people think that there is all this resource and a big budget and a staff. And as local leaders, elected leaders, you generally don't have a staff or a budget and are given a very small stipend, unlivable wage to do the work. So organizing while also working full time and taking care of all of my other council duties. But we have a incredibly committed community that has prioritized racial justice and equity. So just changing the narrative and showing how equity had not been enough, how equity is not reparations, and how reparations is the response and the legislative response that we need to accomplish the things that we say that we value in Evanston. So just changing the narrative around equity being important public policy, ordinary public policy, but it not being reparations, and communicating not only the public, but also the elected. And some of us at the symposium met Professor Al Tillery. He was the leader that came in and educated through closed session our elected city council to be more informed on Black discrimination in our city, hyper-locally, as well as federal discriminations, for example, the discrimination in the rollout of the GI Bill. So public education and changing the narrative around distinguishing the difference between reparations and equity, I think was the biggest hurdle to overcome. But we were fortunate to have Attorney Nkechi Taifa as part of the NARC team, and many others, to Professor Justin Hansford, Cam Howard, Dr. Ron Daniels, a long list, Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, Dr. Iva Carruthers, so many invested in what they saw Evanston attempting to do to make sure that it was accomplished.
So, Robin, you talked about 2019 in that first convening. Well, you just came off of a slam dunk third phenomenal convening symposium of for state and local reparations leaders. You mentioned Dr. Tillery. I was mesmerized by his presentation and surprised with some of the results that he talked about. Can you talk a little bit about that, those results, about the percentages and all like that, in terms of folk who agree with reparations in Evanston, the demographics of that? If you can just share some of that, as well as just some of your general impressions from this third phenomenal convening, several hundred people of state and local reparations leaders from across the country.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the survey because there's a lot of discussion, a lot of criticism, a lot of responsibility on the behalf of Evanston, other communities looking to Evanston as a model, which I think we should be inspiration, but this is work to be done specific to the community. So I requested, along with one of our partners, the Lewis Sebring family, a survey a scientific survey by Dr. Al Tillery. He has a center at Northwestern University, the Center for the Study of Democracy. And he used science, social science, to poll our community and gather the sentiments. We cannot measure the wealth gap yet. It's too early. We just began dispersing, but he measured the sentiments, hearts and minds, value change. And we learned that after implementing reparations, there was a lot of skepticism. Folks weren't sure, weren't in support. It was during COVID, had different priorities. But after years now at this point of public education, policy change, implemented policy change, hearing from now 116 recipients of reparations and how that's changed their wealth trajectory as well as their belief in government. 70% of our white community, 70% of our white community, and we are a predominantly white city. It's important to note Evanston is a small city, 75,000, predominantly white and predominantly affluent. And after years of public education, I must lift up our interfaith community for playing a very important role, our synagogues and temples and houses of worship. 70% of the white community is in support of reparations as public policy. Every demographic in our city had a double-digit percentage increase in their trust with their local government because of the commitment to reparations. We saw the Black community in support by, I believe it's 63%. Of course, I want it to be 100%. There is something to note in the timing of the survey. It was before we expanded our reparations benefit to include cash as an option. And so we will be back in the community with new surveys, seeing how cash being available as an option for reparations change the support or the approval of reparations in the Black community. We do believe that will change. As everyone knows, it's been widely reported that the initial reparation benefits were limited to building wealth through home equity, which is incredible. And still, even with cash being an option, we have many people choosing that as their option for reparations. But we, through many legal memos from the state and federal level and other consultants and experts, we have moved forward with confidence that we can give cash benefits as an option. And we've been doing that starting this year. So about the symposium. The symposium, it was incredible. I'm still feeling the love. Social media is on fire in the responses. What I love most is the intergenerational thing that happened that we're not seeing it enough. And so if you go to our Facebook account, First Repair on Facebook, you'll see young folks, you'll see hip hop, you'll see the language, the culture, really sharing their commitment and their interpretation of reparations. And that is, I think, the biggest win, because I've come into the movement as one of the younger people. And folks, I'm a grandmother, okay? I am not young at all. And to see true young millennials and younger in the movement was exciting, but also just the community. I've heard that it's a boot camp. I heard it's a family reunion. I've heard that it is a symposium is what it is. There's a huge sort of intellectual component to it. I've heard so much great feedback, and we had, it closed at 226. I reported at the conference that there were 200. We did close registration at 200 with many, many more trying to get in, but we did take an additional 26 on site. So we had 226 participants. We had 33 speakers. We had 80 unique reparations initiatives. So that's municipal, state. We had institutional, like DeSLU, led by Robin Prouty. We had Detroit and Asheville and Amherst and Chicago and, San Francisco. The list goes on. I'd be here for a long time. But it was a huge, huge success. We celebrated 50 years of hip hop as our social. We have a social every year. And we had Alaz Muhammad. You want to look this brother up. Yes, he was our archivist.
Yes.
And he brought the reparations hip hop, which was great. We also had an incredible violinist,
Woo!
Indy.
Yes.
Wasn't she incredible?
Yes,
We
indeed.
had a pianist, Corey. So we brought in the arts. I think arts and culture are an area that we can use more to amplify the message of reparations around music. We've seen it done very well through documentary and film. Erica Alexander's film is great. But I would love to see more in music and poetry and arts, public art and so on. So we were able to experience that. We also prioritize wellness, which we're learning to do more so than we have in the past. And we had a wellness room where you could go and get a chair massage, and we were giving out essential oils and things like that. Everything open with, libations. It was just incredible. The speakers, the knowledge. We had a resource room where you could get Sister Nikichi's Reparations on Fire. I don't know if you had Black Lawyer in there as well. You did.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
It was just incredible. We are going to be reporting on it formally soon. So if you're not subscribed to First Repair emails, please do, and you'll get a full conference report.
That is so awesome. I wanted to go back in time a little bit because you were saying like this is the third annual.
Yeah.
But what was it like hosting the first? Like, what gave you the premonition to say we need a national convening on this?
Well, Jam, it was the organic demand for local reparations thought and models. And since the work in Evanston, I hear from leaders every day from all across the nation. And it made sense to get everyone in one space so that we could share our best practices, share our thought leaders, share our practitioners and folks that are providing technical assistance. So what this really is a living toolkit. We call it a symposium. The final session is the living toolkit, which both Jam, thank you so much, and Nikichi for your presentations. But it is a way for us for not just Evanston and me to share, but the others to come in and share their models. For example, Tulsa, Oklahoma, under the leadership of Councilwoman Vanessa Hall Harper and Christy Williams, and all the folks in Tulsa do a great job in organizing public education and community engagement. And so that was one of the sessions. It was their Beyond Apology series and their Black History Saturday that they do. So that was the motivation, to just get everybody in a spot and learn and share together. That's the real values of the symposium, is learning and sharing. And so that first year in 2021, it was much smaller. It was held at my church, which gives you an example of how small it was. And we there were less than 50 of us, I think about 43. The following year, we had in the 70 range. And again, this year it's grown. And so we have a decision to make, really. Do we fight for more resources to have more attendees? I think so. I think as much as there is demand, we want to respond to it. And that's something that we'll look at next year. But this year, we had many that were sponsored. We had about 65 of the guests whose hotel, airfare were all sponsored. There were no conference fees and all meals included. And it's pretty expensive. And we don't want to limit it going forward. So we're going to try to figure that out. I think how we do that is with partnerships with you all, for example. So
let me go on a slightly different track, if I can. We know that you're doing the local work and advising states and other jurisdictions, but you've been on the global front as well. And I know you had to have visited Elmina Dungeon. I'm not going to call it castle, the door of no return, because no one can go to Ghana and not go there, So I'm just curious. What did you feel like? I don't know if that was your first time in Accra or not, but whether it was or not, what did you feel like standing at that door of no return, that last edifice that our ancestors stood on before being forced into the slave ships?
I still don't have the words, but I'll tell you this. Before I was able to go to Accra, the summer before, after getting my African ancestry DNA, I learned that my foremother was from what is now Guinea-Bissau and from the tribe of Balanta. So I was able to travel there just after my term was up on the city council and visit the village, the tribe in which I share ancestry, and go to the equivalent door of no return in Guinea-Bissau. And so I had my first experience there, right on the shores, was able to actually get in the water. And it changed my life. It changed my understanding of the work that we're doing. It changed my conviction. It changed my values. It changed the way I interpret really everything, to have that spiritual moment. And it's a spiritual moment. There was no new knowledge that came in. It was like a spiritual deposit into my being, every piece of me, that evolved my thought and deepened my commitment to the global Black community. I've hoped that everyone is able to have that experience, and I can't say enough or more about what it's done for my life and how it has improved even my leadership.
Thank you for sharing that perspective. We're going to half on the hour. Nikita, you think it's okay to go on to Q&A, or do you have any other questions?
I have one question before we go to Q&A, if that's okay. You were giving me some advice before we opened up the Zoom room, and it was very important advice in terms of how we need to take care of ourselves and learn to say no and things like that. I'm just curious, what keeps your engine running? Okay, what keeps you going? And how do you deal with that balance between the demands of work and family and self-care of yourself? How do you weld all that together? Because you seem to do it quite beautifully.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just kind of curious how you do that.
I appreciate it. It came with some hard lessons. It came with complete burnout and physical sickness and mental exhaustion and self-care, and also clinical therapy. I'll be real transparent with you. And I evolved out of that space, prioritizing boundaries, which I had set none. I had never said the word no before. And I realized through the help of some loved ones that I am no good for the movement if I am not well and I am not my best. And so we work really hard. And what I've realized is that sometimes we're in a sprint, like we're in a season of grind, right? But you have to pause and rest. And so at First Repair, for example, we take the last 2 weeks of December off. When the team is beat up and burnt out, we pause and may have a spa day, for example. I personally, my self-care includes live music and aromatherapy and time by large bodies of water and forest bathing, which has nothing to do with being naked in a park, okay? Because if someone says, what is that? But just time in nature. And you can even do that in the inner city. Just find a forest preserve or a park, just connect with nature, trees and water and so on. And then people that I feel safe around, that bring me joy, that make me laugh, that nurture me, and I nurture them back. That's going to be my family and my closest friends and loved ones. That's what I do. And so we should all know when we're getting there, when we're getting exhausted and we burn out, and whether your response to that might be you're irritable or you're tired, you can't start yawning, or you're physically ill. Pause, take the time and space that you need to pause so that you could show up better and well. And I'm fortunate we share a partner in Liberation Ventures who is a funder that prioritizes that. And I have so much appreciation for them in doing that.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so very much for that. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to step into that path. So Jam, just go in and start with the Q&A.
Sure. I'm gonna go up a bit. So Kabibi asked, what should be the strategy for confronting states seeking passage of legislation prohibiting reparations? And for context for everyone, I believe it's a Florida senator that is trying to
Florida, Texas is
yeah,
it's spreading.
ban legislation specifically for descendants of slaves for reparations. So that's currently what's happening.
Yeah, you're right. So it was just actually December 1st, if I'm not mistaken, the Florida assemblyman made the introduction, but it was June 23rd of this year that a Texas congressman did the same thing. So there's currently House Bill, I believe it's 4321, you have to look it up, but introduced a no government bailout anti-reparations bill that would prohibit us from doing the local work that we're doing. And it would, for example, our communities wouldn't receive COVID dollars, possibly, or ARPA funds, possibly CDBG funds. These are funds that our communities rely on for life, health, and safety matters, all human services related. And so the strategy is to educate the community. I think the strategy for almost everything is public education. If folks are organized and educated around what reparations is and not buying into the narrative that it is some sort of penalty to the white community, or it's going to completely create a race riot. Look at Evanston for an example of how it actually has united a community and how it is a benefit to the entire community. Reparations is a public benefit, in fact. If you look at the cost of segregation report, it's an older report from 2019. It shows how if the city of Chicago addressed its racial segregation and anti-Blackness, how it would increase all livability standards across the entire city, increasing the Chicago GDP by $4 billion, more college degrees, $1 million more household income for Black families, and so on and so on. So I believe the way to respond to that is more public education and organizing.
Thank you. Another question Kay Hubbard asked, in Congress, after reps sign on to HR 40, what if anything what if anything I'm not sure what the sentence is asking, but it seems like, how do we move this work forward from out here? It seems like, what do they do to move it forward? It seems like they do little or nothing to inform or organize voters.
Well, I agree. Not enough is happening. We know that Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee is an incredible voice for reparations and shows up when we're organizing, whether it's in COBRA or NARC or First Repair, all across the nation. She's doing her work, but not enough is happening, especially if we had, was it 217 co-sponsors and yes votes in the House, a Senate companion bill, and no floor vote. I mean, there is an indication that not enough is happening. They should be pushing on their House leaders to at least get a floor vote so we can show that milestone and work towards an executive order, knowing that passing the Senate is unlikely. So not enough is the answer. And that's something that we can do. We can be informed by what they're not doing. There's an opportunity for us to organize. When we're talking to our congressional leaders, we need to be lifting up HR 40. We need to be making the demand for a floor vote, and at this point, for an executive order for HR 40, because not enough is happening.
So I see a question.
I will add that I think the local activity is something that we can point to when we are making this demand with our Congress people. We can look to wherever their district is and show them here's 24 initiatives in your district that are making the demand for reparations, and that should go up to a congressional action.
EJ Scott is asking, this is kind of adjacent, reparations adjacent, I guess. He says, as a realtor, he would like your perspective. He says, we know, or it might be she, excuse me, I'm not sure. We know that Black homes are historically devalued when appraised. Has there been any changes, corrections, or advancements in making appraisals more equitable?
I do know that there is some activity around addressing that. There was a lot of journalism that happened around the disparities around home appraisals. And I can't give you an update, but here's my recommendation that you follow up with NARAB, which is the National Association for Real Estate Brokers. It is the nation's longest serving Black real estate trade association, and they fight for housing democracy for the Black community. There are member chapters all across the nation. So depending on where you are, there's going to be a local chapter. And through their leadership, you can stay updated on what's happening with NARAB. They are always presenters at the National Black Caucus, where they give state of the Black housing updates. And that would be a partner that you can take some direction from and partner with in advocating for addressing the appraisal industry. All of the housing, realtors, mortgage banking, appraisals, and so on.
So, Jan, before you go to the next question, I know you're trying to formulate the question. Let me ask another question, if I may, Robin. Something we didn't really address earlier. It appears to me that you had like the perfect set of circumstances kind of coming together in Evanston that made it much more likely for you to be successful. You have the Shorefront Legacy Center with our dear brother, Dino Robertson, I think his name is. You had fellow alderpersons. I forgot the names of a white woman, for one, who was just phenomenal. I forgot her name. And then Peter Braithwaite. What was her name again?
Ann Rainey.
Ann Rainey, that's right, Ann Rainey and Peter. And then you had the faith community there very strong. You had a very supportive, what we call it in DC Corporation Council, but your legal folk.
Yeah.
Right, Nate Cummings. And so it was like a perfect story. And then we had you, Robin Rue Simmons, the catalyst that brought it all together. Every jurisdiction doesn't have that set of circumstances fused together. So what advice can you give to jurisdictions that might not have been as greatly endowed as Evanston was, in terms of the right partners there at the right time, moving in the right direction? You know what I'm saying?
So I do know what you're saying. And when I go into cities, there are many cities I have to tell them, you're not primed to call the question. It will set you back further than it will advance the cause. The more work has to be done. And I will say that we're fortunate to have a archivist who's been archiving Black history for 25 years in Evanston with 400 linear square feet. I had colleagues on city council. Auntie Ann is how I refer to her, a white woman, a elderly white woman. Ann must be in her mid 70s or late 70s for sure. Peter Braithwaite, another brother on council, incredible. We had Corporation Counsel Nick Cummings, a brother that was committed and came to Evanston because he wanted to be a part of this work. So yes, we did have a unique cast of leaders, but every community has their Dino. Every community has their strong legal mind. Every community has some form of an interfaith coalition. So it's back to that community education, because we weren't doing reparations work at all. We were doing equity work. We were doing ordinary public policy. We hadn't thought about reparations as a local legislation ever, although we did pass a resolution in 2002 led by Judge Lionel Jean-Baptiste, but it was to support HR 40. So together we had the right spirit, we had the right humility, the right intentions to work together, all be educated together. I was educated along with my community to make it happen. But part of the toolkit that I share and the workshop that I share all across the nation shows you how to identify each of these partners in your community and how to relate to them, inform them, introduce them to Nkechi and Jam, and have them have, whether it's virtual or in person, town halls and these types of things to educate their community. It is possible it may not be possible at the next city council meeting in every community, but it is possible in every community because the infrastructure is there. We just have to get the people educated. And then one thing I want to say is I felt like I had an army. Okay. When I met the Encobra Chicago chapter, you couldn't tell me anything because they were showing up. They had their signs and they had the
banner
and everything. It was going down. I'm like, y'all don't listen. We need to respond to this situation. It's a situation here. So I say all that to say your grassroots orgs that are in town, let them know what you're doing so they can show up at public comment. They could show up to meetings. They can use their socials and the way that they use organizing grassroots techniques for getting the message out. Make sure that you are engaging them. And remember, Encobra has chapters all across the nation also. So you may want to find out through Kenneth, and there's a new male co-chair. You may want to get in touch with Encobra and find out what member chapters are active where, because they could be your partner, as the Chicago chapter of Encobra was for me in 2019.
So, Jam, do we have any more Q&A questions you want to propose to Robin?
Yes. This one kind of goes back to what we were discussing earlier. How can reparation efforts work in tandem with other Black liberation and healing efforts? For example, environmental justice, violence prevention, home ownership, etc.
They're all a reparations matter. I mean, if we are looking at a comprehensive reparations goal, right? We're looking at 5 components to full repair. Then environmental justice falls in there, police reform falls in there, and so it's not. They're in tandem. They complement one another, and they are a reparations cause. And so one thing that I love I'm seeing develop is housing and democracy is getting that this is a housing democracy is a reparations matter. And we saw that with the presentation from Tanika Johnson from the Folded Map Project, who was an artist turned housing advocate turned reparations leader. And it's the same thing with me. I have to be really honest. I wasn't fighting for reparations. I supported Rep. John Conyers and HR 40 and, but I was not a reparationist until I had 20 years of public service fighting for Black empowerment and liberation and 2 years on the city council, seeing what's possible. We can actually pass a reparative justice legislation. We can name it reparations and we can give reparations by way of cash and other benefits. I evolved to that. And I think that we need to show environmental justice workers and police reform and everyone that's working on a matter that impacts the upliftment of Black folks, how reparations is the legislative response. There's no other way we're going to get there other than reparations.
And on that note, we have a question. How can you counteract the negative attitude some may have towards Black people receiving reparations? Some saying Black folks are financially responsible for reparations. Some saying the U.S. has too much debt to support a federal reparations deal, etc. Also, could free college be part of the reparations agreement?
So yes to free college is recommended probably in every city that we're in. It was a recommendation for Evanston. The thing we have to remember is that when we're putting together our reparations proposals, we need to be careful that we do it within the purview of the institution that we're passing the reparations. So in the case of free college, Northwestern University is here. Northwestern needs to be committing to reparations. The city can't enforce that, is the response to that last question. The negative narrative, what was the question about the
how do you respond to we have too much debt for a federal reparations plan, or we're going going to be financially responsible for our own reparations plan, that kind of negativity.
Okay, well, I'll say this. There are many, many ways that we can point to how too much debt is not the response to the emergency of COVID or whatever else. We came up with the money for the immigration crisis. We came up with the money for dozens of, and I can't wait to Professor Cornell Brooks from Harvard releases his study that shows all the ways the United States government pays reparations to harmed communities in this nation, just not the Black community. The 9/11 panel, I forget what the formal name of it, Jam, you probably know, 9/11 victims and their families received reparations. There's a long list of the ways the government figures out a way to finance it and fund it, and it's not a matter of fiscal irresponsibility. But when it comes to the Black community, somehow it's unimaginable and unattainable. And it's just not the case. We have to continue putting that in the face. Well, what about this response to our border issue? What about this immediate and appropriate response to the pandemic? Why can't we use some of those strategies and techniques and that level of commitment for the Black community? And more public education has to happen, because it's not happening because we're still living in a predominantly, white supremacist sort of leadership in this nation. And until those hearts and minds are changed, we'll still see HR 40 in the same position that it is in right now since 1989. Until we do that. So that's why I love both of your organizations so much, because we cannot get enough education out there. Jam, I love your fresh approach on your Instagrams. I love just when your face pops up, the way that you're educating us. And Nkechi, I don't know a person with more enthusiasm and energy and power than you. And so I want to thank you both, Nkechi, for many, many years of service. Jam, for your innovative way that you keep us educated, your comprehensive look at reparations, your inclusive and united sort of grace that you have is just so fresh, and I love it. So
thank you so much. Going back to the comprehensive part of it, I think that is what we have to focus on with the public education, like you were saying. A big part of, and I talked about this at the symposium, a big part of trying to deny us our claim is disconnecting us from the era of enslavement, and then acting like all these vestiges of chattel slavery are not right in our face.
Right.
So I think that definitely has to be a component of the public education. This next question, though, I think it's very interesting. I have been to the National Museum of African American History and Culture so many times because I'm in the DMV. Sometimes I'll pop in there for lunch just because they have really good food. But this person said, I recently attended the National Museum of African American History and Culture in September after experiencing the exhibit and the emotional toll associated with Black American history and trauma in this country, along with several ethnicities. My assumption is that every person who walked through that museum would support reparation if polled after exiting the museum. Would that be of value to the cause of reparations to survey people at the museum?
Absolutely. It's another type of education. And I think that's a great idea. Whoever gave that question, partner with the museum and ask for polling. I don't know how that works, but I don't think we should turn down any ideas that will advance the cause of reparations. I know that the Congressional Black Caucus, I think it was last year, Jam, I'm sure you know the details of this, polled, and the number one priority for their constituents was reparations.
Yeah, it was over voting rights. It was over other things. Reparations was number one. Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah.
But then what do we do with it? So what did the Congressional Black Caucus do with that information?
They ignored it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. Ironically, I'm not sure, maybe you all received it too. Someone forwarded this in a thread. You know how you get those campaign emails that say this particular issue is important, donate? There
Mhm.
was one for CBC that was like, are you in support of reparations for Black Americans? Donate now. Like I couldn't verify if it was really from the CBC, but it looked real. And someone forwarded and said, this is interesting. So maybe they are fundraising and plan to do something really big next year.
So
I
going back
hope
to
so.
going back to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, you see, back in the day, we would have been out there on the street, right in front of the museum, doing our own poll, doing our own survey. Those are the things that we used to do. That grassroots activism, not waiting for the museum to come up with their pristine study or whatever. We would have our clipboard out there, and we would be doing that. I don't know why we've lost that type of spirit, but we need to get back to it, because we can very easily do things like that without even the sanction of the museum or Congress or anything along those lines.
And you know what I would recommend? I would recommend that you educate us. We don't know what we don't know. And I think there should be like organizing school. I know when I decided to run for public office, I knew I wasn't educated on how to do that. So I went to campaign training and all this organizing academies and all these things so that I could learn. And I think we have a lot of the passion, but don't understand. We don't know the models. We don't know. And so I think there's a great opportunity for us to be educated on, because I learn so much every day. And I have a real privilege to have access to you and all the others that I named before. And I learn and I apply what I learn. And I think more of us need to be educated on these types of actions and tactics that we don't know. See, I went right to default to have the museum do it. You're right. We should be out there doing it. But then also the Congressional Black Caucus should do something, that they get polling results that say this is the #1 priority. At least it should be prioritized at the CBC conference, as a sort of key session. Or, I know the Congresswoman has her brain trust. I understand there were multiple reparations panels, maybe at CBC. That could be someplace else, I'm not sure. But there should be more of a priority if that's a #1 issue of its constituents.
Right.
Yeah, I think there is a major issue with, in the nonprofit world, we would call it institutional knowledge, that transfer of generational knowledge to be able to maintain a initiative or program or whatever you're working on. And I think that the symposium you have is actually helping with that void that we have sometimes in that vein. We only
I know we're getting down to a close, but let me just say something. I'm just looking at the screen right now. Believe it or not, this is an intergenerational screen with the three of us. I mean, I know they say, what they say, don't crack. But we are all in different age zones, 3 separate age zones. Mm-hmm. I'm a baby boomer. What are you, Robin?
I'm a X.
You're an X and you're a millennial, Jam, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, you wouldn't believe it.
That's beautiful.
Hopefully, I don't know. I got some. But this is what it's all about: transmitting information, the fusion back and forth between the generations. I learned from the younger generations learn from me. That's what's important, and I think that is what's going to help to fuel the movement. I just have one more question for Jam, for Robin. I'm sorry if I can, Jam. I don't know if there's any other biting questions from the before the Q&A before we close up. But let me just ask this question. Okay, so Robin, you was the star in the big Payback. So you're the movie star. You're the Rosa Parks of the movement. Okay.
Yeah.
Evanston. What is next for Robin Rue Simmons? Now you don't have to tell. I mean, you don't have to spell it because I don't know. You know what I think. You may not remember. I mentioned something about it's a federal congressperson, Senate type of scenario in the future for you. But I'm just asking, what do you want to share with us, if anything, as to what's next for Robin Rue Simmons?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I get a lot of requests for a congressional run, and that's not something that is in my near future. I will say that I want to finish writing. I started a book project that I tabled because the demand for local reparation support was so great. And I tabled the book. I would like to be able to finish that book. I've also started early work for a documentary that is the intersection of hip hop and reparations. I'm excited to be able to complete that project. And then we're opening a resource center, a physical location here in Evanston that will take a lot of time in programming. So one thing that we did use a symposium was to be informed by those attendees on what would be of value to see in this space: archives, lecture series, toolkits, and so on in this physical space. And so those are the three high priorities: writing, this documentary, and this resource center. I'm not considering a political run anytime in the near future, but I have stopped saying no, absolutely not. I have healed from my time in local government, and I have stopped saying no. But right now, I would love, love, love to be able to finish the book. And I'm not a writer, so it's a stretch. It is a stretch. I'm stretching myself. I'm really stretching and growing to be able to do this, and I'm committed to getting it done in 2024.
All right.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Ashe. So I need help, Sister Nkechi.
Call me anytime. It's all good.
So
Jam,
we have so many questions.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this is always like this. Like we start off slow, and the next thing you know, at the end, it's like 30 questions. So I think I'm just going to ask this one last question because this person asked multiple questions. I want to be able to get to at least one of them. But and you spoke to some of this earlier, and this was raised at the symposium. How critical is, and this is from Mark Buford, how critical is a grassroots mobilization needed to push the reparation agenda? Do fraternities, sororities, and other national orgs have a role to play?
It's everything. And so Mark Buford, I love that my father's name is Buford. And therefore my son's name is Buford. But it's everything. I think that is what is missing. I really do. I think the grassroots mass movement building, and I know that there is a young sister that is working on that specifically, but that is the key that is missing right now. There are legislators that are committed. They're doing their jobs. They're getting these reparations legislations passed, but many of them are passing without any teeth or substance. Because there's no budgets, there's no plans, and there's no tangibles that's coming out of it. And it is the grassroots community, definitely the Divine Nine. And there was a leader there, Dr. Sheila Flemings, out of the Atlanta area. And she called out the Divine Nine. She's a Delta. And she called out all of the Greek community with a demand to organize and mobilize around reparations. So yes, it is everything. And I believe it is the key missing component is enough people in the streets organizing, numbers, petitions, public comment, letters of support. Nkechi has the yard signs everywhere. These types of things I think are definitely missing. And not just the Divine Nine. The NAACP has branches all across the nation, well-funded, well-organized, professional staff. The NAACP is another. I know that our local branch of NAACP in Evanston is doing amazing work, but aren't there hundreds of NAACP branches? Same thing with the Urban League. Aren't there hundreds? Same thing with clergy coalitions and interfaith community groups and this types of thing. These are the leaders that we need to emerge more so than we've seen to get us to full repair.
Thank you so much, Robin. We're going to close it out there. I'm just going to answer one of the questions. Are there any reparation education tools for teachers to build with youth advocates? You can go to firstrepair.org. They do have a toolkit. You can also go to the Reparation Education Project, and you can go to aboutreparations.com. So there's and you could also go to the Institute of the Black World 21st Century that has NARC's information. You can go to NCOBRA's website that has recent information and archived information, just so that you know there's a wealth of history available online for you to take hold of. And for everybody that asked questions tonight, I did try my very best to copy and paste most of these questions so they can be answered in future Information Thought Series. So sorry we couldn't get to everyone's questions, but we just want to give a big, big, big thank you so much to Robin Rue Simmons, coming off the heels of your 3rd National Symposium, gathering all the reparations activists across the country, hundreds coming together for this massive love and brain swell that we're going to need to move the reparations movement forward. Nikichi, you have any final words tonight?
Yes, I want to say that we record all of our Reparation Information Thought Series. So the video of this will totally and completely be available. You can watch it over and over, share with your family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, organizations, and the like. And it lives on the Nikichi Taifa YouTube channel, and hopefully anywhere else anybody wants to live. So not only this Reparation Information Thought Series webinar, but all the webinars that we've done over the past year are there and available. Back to you, Jam, to just close us out. Robin, we love you.
Love you. Love you.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone. And you'll be hearing from us soon from the Reparation Information Thought Series. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.